how do you fix this?
Parking wars on the Gold Coast.
Thousands of school leavers ready to hit the Gold Coast.
50,000 Southerners moved to the city in the 5 years from 2016.
That's a question the city of the Gold Coast tried to answer. A city built on beaches, cars and chaos, the Gold Coast was never really exactly known for good urban planning, with its dystopian urban sprawl, Stroads and the Miami-style terraforming of estuaries into the water version of car dependency, but for jet skis. But in 2014, something surprising happened. The city actually created a viable answer to fix decades of urban planning cock-ups. And that solution? A sleek new light rail along its densest area of poor public transport, crime and gridlock streets. Although the light rail wasn't the Gold Coast's first attempt at a so-called game-changing rail system, far from it actually, as the city had already tried not one, but two monorails. One looped exclusively inside the private theme park SeaWorld, and the other connected a shopping centre to a casino at Broadbeach, 300 metres apart. One wonders why it failed. But the modern-day light rail is different from the two monorail gadget barns of the past, because it actually works. Streets came alive with people ditched their cars, and it felt like progress in the otherwise dreary glitter strip as ridership slowly increased above estimations. But then something changed. The otherwise successful tram of the Gold Coast, still in its infancy and still growing, suddenly faced an existential threat before the project could be properly completed to its logical maturity. What could only be described as an unholy alliance of stupidity, ignorance, and arrogance resulted in the light rail project being indefinitely cancelled. But there's more to it than just hubris. Stick around and you'll see why such a promising project was halted before it could reach its full potential. And when you find out the reasons it was cancelled, it's bound to make you scream into the screen. Now, I'm going to give you a bit of context of the Gold Coast Light Rail to see how we got here. See, the Gold Coast is about 100 kilometres south of Brisbane, and it began as small townships along the Nerang River before booming tourism and interstate migration merged them into the sprawling city we know today as the Gold Coast. Everyone wanted to live by the beach, leading to a dense line of high-rises and endless traffic along a narrow strip of the Gold Coast, naturally adjacent to the beach. Now, this linear pattern made the city ideal for a tram. First proposed in the 90s as an alternative to the constant road widening, the light rail project gained strong public support, with around 70% of people surveyed in 2007 indicating they prefer a tram over a bus, with only about 6% of people preferring a bus over a tram. After years of bureaucratic umming and ahhing, Stage 1 of the Gold Coast Light Rail opened in 2014, running from the Gold Coast University Hospital to Broadbeach South. Despite early doubts, the light rail, branded as the G-Link, was a success. Ridership and nearby property values rose steadily, proving demand for better public transport and expanding the city's taxable base at the same time. Its success spurred Stage 2, connecting the line to Helensvale and re-establishing rail access from Brisbane to the beach for the first time since the 1960s. And again, success started to be measured, with ridership increasing further and property values again increasing adjacent to the light rail corridor. Now, this indicates a very strong desire for people to live near the light rail. And it's with this success the government then moved on to Stage 3. With Stage 3 extending the line to Burleigh, momentum remained strong of completing the line, until unfortunately COVID-19 delayed construction start to 2022. But 3 years on from construction start, the project remains unfinished, and public frustration has begun to build on the otherwise delayed and now over-budget Stage 3 extension. But despite the frustrations of Stage 3, the government didn't want to wait and pushed on with the Stage 4 planning to finally connect end-to-end the light rail from the heavy rail at Helensvale to the Gold Coast Airport in Tugun, as well as areas slated for dense developments. But construction delays of Stage 3, confusing construction diversions, and impacts on residents and local businesses due to the construction access restrictions created a local opposition against the Stage 4 extension project. But disgruntled local residents aren't usually enough to derail, pun intended, a crucial transit link. No, the project got cancelled for much stupider reasons. Now let's have a look at them, starting with the cost. Now, it's a known fact that the after effects of COVID sent prices skyrocketing for everything, especially construction, resulting in uncontrolled inflation for everything. Stage 3 was not immune to such effects, and as the delays for the project for many reasons started to increase, so did the price. And in tune with the typical Australian construction project, the project became over time and over budget. This meant that when costing for Stage 4 was first done, they projected the Stage 4 to cost on the high end nearly $8 billion for 13 kilometres of light rail track, with 2 small bridges included. How on earth they got this price is beyond me, but it seems to be an extrapolation of Stage 3 costs, which honestly, yeah, that might make sense? Now, cost blowouts of Australian infrastructure isn't a surprise at this point, as Queensland alone spent a total of $6.7 billion on cost blowouts alone in 2022 to 23, which is a very convenient total blowout number that totals the lower end estimates of the Stage 4 light rail cost. At this point, cost blowouts in Australia are so normalised that no one even blinks. The government throws out a random number, adds a few more billion, and we just shrug it off because, honestly, we're so far behind on crucial infrastructure that all we want is for them to just build the damn thing and we'll worry about the costs later. But cost blowouts alone isn't enough to outright kill a crucial infrastructure project. There's something more to it. Which brings me to the second stupid reason they cancelled the light rail: community concern. Now, community opposition is, of course, a legitimate part of the political theatre that is urban planning. But my God, the cries of Karens have become so absurdly effective at derailing crucial infrastructure projects. Sadly, the Gold Coast Light Rail Stage 4 was no exception. And oh boy, this segment is a juicy one. No one's pretending that Stage 3 construction was pleasant. Small businesses lost customers as road access vanished, and there was no light rail yet to bring in new foot traffic. And the endless 24/7 construction noise shredded sleep schedules across the coast. So yes, it's totally fair to be annoyed. But these kinds of short-term grievances are just a blip in the long life cycle of urban transport development. Unfortunately, many locals didn't care about the long term when their present comfort was on the line. And why should they? So they banded together, forming a resistance group determined to fight the vital Stage 4 expansion tooth and nail. And this was despite multiple surveys across the coast showing overwhelming support for the project. And yet somehow the government decided to hit pause and rerun the entire consultation process. Why, you ask? Oh, we'll get to that. Trust me, it's important. But the opposition group, charmingly named Save Our Southern Gold Coast, began hosting community meetings to explain why Stage 4 must be stopped. For your masochist entertainment, someone even filmed one of these meetings and uploaded it to YouTube that you can watch. Though I won't subject you to it unless you enjoy secondhand embarrassment and mild nausea, because expect rants about developer corruption, wild conspiracy theories, and plenty of people just blowing off steam. They also have a website, which luckily for my blood pressure, lets me read their points instead of listening to them. And despite how absurd their arguments were, the government treated their grievances with serious consideration. Now, I'm going to give this section a bit of extra spotlight, not just because the details will matter later, but also because I need to thoroughly roast the reasoning behind it. Just a fair warning, this section is so infuriating for anyone who doesn't want to have their city choked with cars, and I apologize in advance if I get too animated and peek the microphone out. Trigger warning over. Let's dive into the infuriating reasons this project got canned, starting from the mildly dumb and ascending in magnitude of stupidity. Number 1, cultural heritage and environment. Yes, Aboriginal cultural heritage and the environment always gets trotted out by the locals in a desperate attempt to stop anything with a bulldozer. Yes, Aboriginal cultural heritage and environment protection are important, no one's arguing that. But it's not like these aren't already baked into modern construction processes and not something we already easily deal with. Oh, and don't forget the koalas, who can't see their mates. Because a light rail cutting through a tiny mapped koala habitat will single-handedly buckle the koala population on the southern Gold Coast. And definitely not the sea of low-density residential and stroads. Yep, it's definitely the light rail that'll buckle the koala population. But hey, I guess the koalas can't see their mates to give each other chlamydia anymore. And if you're losing sleep over a bit of sediment runoff during construction, like they really claim they're really concerned about, just wait until the next annual flood barrels through those same 2 rivers where the light rail bridges are planned, carrying tons more sediment than any construction site could ever produce. If a bit more sediment buckles the environment, then it was already well and truly fucked. Number 2, urban planning impacts. Now, no one really cares about the natural environment in Australia until it's their own built environment that gets threatened, which is no surprise why NIMBYs take their perceived impacts and try and turn it into some kind of existential human existence threat. And the Gold Coast tram was no different. Now, there's a few of these subcategories, so let's go through them, with the first subcategory being a concern of density, parking, overcrowding, and the concrete jungle. One of the reasons the light rail was first implemented was to effectively transport people to the densest areas of the Gold Coast, right next to the beach. Naturally, this is where it's hardest to find car parks, and it looks not the best with massive concrete towers everywhere. Locals around Stage 4 thought that the correlation of traffic, lack of parking, and high-density towers means the light rail created that, and Stage 4 would bring such impacts to the southern Gold Coast. But anyone with access to historical Google Maps imagery can see these high-rises, traffic jams, and apocalyptic parking situations were here well before the light rail. And the fears that the light rail will induce high density are unfounded, because the mayor of the Gold Coast, Tom Tate, clearly said the southern Gold Coast area will develop regardless if the light rail goes ahead or not. So not only will you have high density, limited parking spaces and traffic jams in the area, you will now be wholly unprepared to handle all of that.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
As the opposition group website is quoted as saying, people will struggle to get home amongst the traffic. Yeah, you see that giant yellow and blue bus with steel wheels and its own right of way? You could have maybe used that. But nah, sit in traffic, it's all the same to me. Though not to sound completely unhinged, the Southern Gold Coasters, otherwise known as NIMBYs, had proffered two of their own solutions, and it's of no surprise that tech bros had the exact solution for them. Introducing a next-generation autonomous mass mobility ecosystem that redefines how urban populations interface with transit infrastructure. This modular, energy-positive platform leverages decentralized propulsion architectures, liberating mobility from the constraints of legacy combustion paradigms, while integrating AI-driven traffic orchestration to algorithmically prioritize movement within dynamically optimized express corridors. Each mobility pod operates within a frictionless, non-interlocked network topology, enabling real-time rerouting elasticity and adaptive routes synchronization on sub-5-minute cycles. And what shall we call this new innovative mass transport pod? Well, despite all the tech bro jargon, what is actually being described is a simple electric bus. But what's ultimately hilarious about this is that they use the Brisbane Metro, not a metro, as an example of how great it would be because it has Wi-Fi and charging. Wowee, so revolutionary. Look, the Brisbane Metro is another huge topic in itself, and a large video about it is coming in the future. But to cut a long story short, it's okay. But certainly not the transport panacea for Brisbane's woeful bus network for many reasons. And the Gold Coast would be no different with a Zeb. Look, if you couldn't make it work with a diesel bus, it sure as hell wouldn't work with an electric bus. And they really don't help themselves with a half-assed paragraph description citing light rail tracks as permanent and buses as being so flexible they can go to where the demand is at the moment. Yeah, love, without bus lanes, they'll be stuck in traffic like Brisbane and Gold Coast current buses. And of course, their dumb NIMBY website doesn't mention any of that in their short one-paragraph description of a tech bro bus, because the rest is just filled with copy-paste descriptions of electric buses around the country. Because had they mentioned the need for bus lanes, then they would have essentially proposed a BRT system, which is fine, because BRTs have an unbeatable value for money proposition and can really compete with trams. But that's a discussion for another point. Why they didn't propose bus lanes will become important later, so keep that in mind. But if tech bro buses weren't frustrating enough of a NIMBY alternative to the Gold Coast light rail, there was something more frustrating proposed: the heavy rail connection. Proposing a heavy rail instead of a light rail on the face doesn't seem too bad, but there's more to it than that. Because oh boy, this one nearly made me crash out. Not just because the NIMBY arguments were painfully stupid, but because the state government had already built a crucial heavy rail line to the Gold Coast, only for it to stop at Varsity Lakes, a mere 15 kilometers short of the international airport. You know, the same airport that played a key role during the Commonwealth Games and handles plenty of budget international flights that Brisbane residents regularly use? Yeah. What makes it worse is that the government had a perfectly good corridor right next to the highway to extend the line all the way to the airport. But instead, in true Australian transport tradition, they chose the most predictable solution imaginable. They widened the highway. Now, the clowns on the Southern Gold Coast do have a point in calling for the heavy rail to reach the airport. And for about half a second, I actually agreed with them. Then I remembered, this has nothing to do with the light rail. They are two separate pieces of infrastructure, serving two different groups and two different routes. The light rail services local dense neighborhoods, and the heavy rail is for high-capacity, long-distance passengers. Why are they conflating the two? But annoyingly, because the light rail was supposed to connect to the airport, it now became branded as the Gold Coast Airport Connection Solution, which somehow hijacked the objective of the light rail, which wasn't that. So they just started discussing the best way to connect to the airport. But the real answer to which of the two rail systems should be built is both. They should build both the heavy rail and the light rail. Because taking the light rail to the airport would be idiotic, because the light rail isn't fast, nor should it be, as it's designed to connect high-density areas, not regional destinations. It currently takes 45 minutes from end to end of stage 1 and 2, and when you include stage 3 and 4, it would take 1.5 hours to connect from the heavy rail to the airport. Now, combine that with the already 1 hour and 8-minute journey to Helensvale from Brisbane with the train. Your trip from Brisbane becomes a minimum of 2.5 hours just to go about 100 kilometers to the airport. Ideally, both should be built to connect with each other at the airport or intermittently with other light rail or bus lines. The light rail handles connections to the dense Gold Coast beaches, and the heavy rail handles fast, long connections to the airport. But I can tell you that the state government isn't interested in doing both anytime soon. Because when I studied urban planning a few years ago, in one of my transport lectures, we had a transport planner from a major transport planning consultancy that has large projects for the government that at this point shall remain nameless. Now, this transport planning consultant told me they should just build a tram, because why would you connect two airports with a rail line? Everyone just goes to Brisbane Airport anyway. No, people don't just go to Brisbane Airport, as Gold Coast is a large budget airline hub. And also, are people from the southern Gold Coast not allowed to take the train to Brisbane, and vice versa? Are people from Brisbane not allowed to fly out of Gold Coast with budget airlines, and vice versa? Because they sure as hell won't be taking a 2.5-hour train journey. Keep in mind, this was in the years before Brisbane Airport had its second runway, and the airport was constantly overloaded and delayed due to congestion of one runway. So the government was looking at leveraging the Gold Coast Airport even more, which could have been a viable opportunity if you could get there within 1 hour. But you couldn't. Look, there are a lot of things wrong with Queensland trains, and I will do a video about them, but for our purposes, they are functional within their bounds. But yeah, these are our transport planners advising the government, and that's why we get stupid outcomes. So to summarize, the heavy rail will fix this, and the light rail will fix this. But although conflating two separate infrastructure issues are somewhat relatable, nothing will prepare you for the emotional drivel rage bait of the major NIMBY complaint that's about to come next. Protecting the surfer lifestyle. The southern Gold Coast. A sacred land where the waves are pure, the utes are shiny, and any hint of public transport is treated like an existential threat. Because nothing helps dealing with crippling car dependency and traffic like going for a surf. As an Aussie living in Switzerland, people always ask me, "Oh my god, do you surf?" And rave about the amazing surfer lifestyle they had on a gap year to Australia after high school, and slummed it with a bogan knob with a surfboard. What they don't know is that surfers are often a bunch of wankers who don't want people surfing their waves.
Putting your way through the fuck off. Why do you have to be so hostile? No, we're not sharing our waves from foreigners, okay? You're not allowed to surf here, you're only locals here. Okay, you must go now, right now.
The internet is full of anecdotal evidence and videos of surfers getting aggressive to outsiders and not treating newbies very well. Yes, not all of them are like that, but enough of them are to warrant this stereotype. And in this case, the Gold Coast Light Rail Stage 4 is figuratively newbie surfers looking to surf their waves in droves. Because nothing says protecting our coastal lifestyle like opposing clean electric transport and insisting on driving through traffic and cruising around trying to find one car park. Apparently, a light rail would destroy the charm, unlike the 24/7 traffic jams and apartment blocks already there. The real fear isn't overcrowding. It's a possibility that someone new might show up at their beach. And for those who don't know the topography of how a beach works and where the light rail would go, here is the beach with the waves, and here is where the tram's supposed to go. In the middle of a 4-lane strode, nowhere near the waves, and certainly not bulldozing the beach. But the stupid comments continue. Trams will not suffice compared to solar electric buses, which are more practical and sustainable in an era of climate change. Local buses run regularly and could be improved on with modern style technology that is in more keeping with reducing our carbon footprint and maintaining the southern Gold Coast appeal. There's that tech bro rubbish again. Solar electric buses don't exist as a mass transit solution. And what's more sustainable than an electric tram? But here comes a 1000 IQ comment. Buses would be way preferable for traveling to the beach with families, boards and surf gear compared to the inadequate storing space on a light rail. What the family? Trams have by far more floor space than buses, so the argument about storing surfboards is nonsense. And tram manufacturers can easily add surfboard racks, which Bombardier already did for the Gold Coast Light Rail. Adding surfboard racks was so quintessential Australian that the German news outlet Der Spiegel thought it was so Aussie that they did a newspaper article about it. And with light rail having more floor space, it can carry a lot more people and their stupid surfboards at the same time. But the stupid comments continue to get worse. Tourism will suffer if we do not look after our natural assets and enhance our existing surroundings. Again, I didn't realise a 4-lane strode of concrete and bitumen was a natural asset that belongs in a David Attenborough documentary. Because if there's one thing I know about tourists from overseas coming to see the beaches of Australia, it's that they really want to see a strode, and they really want to get hit by a car whilst trying to cross it. Yep, that's the tourism. But the comments get even worse. The light rail has the propensity to change the southern end of the Gold Coast, losing its charm forever. And it is that daunting prospect which presents such a huge worry for all concerned. Charm? I didn't realise that a highway straight through your neighbourhood with overpriced coffee shops and dilapidated houses is a desirable charm. But yeah, I feel you. But it's okay, because we got a Shaka Bra quote to save the day. Don't destroy what you came to enjoy. Shaka Bra! Yep, I came to enjoy the traffic and get hit by a surfing twat in a bombed out lifted 4x4 trying to find a car park to go catch some waves. Hey Southern Gold Coasters, I get it. It's a nice place and you don't want any change that could threaten that. But I promise you, the area will change, and there's little you can do to stop it. but you can do a lot to manage the worst aspects of increased population by building a light rail and allowing people to not use a car to get to your beautiful spots. But as unhinged, stupid, and infuriating the reasons to cancel the light rail can be, they weren't taken lightly by the recently elected LNP state government. So how did these stupid reasons have the effect of effectively killing the tram project? The high cost shouldn't be that much of a factor, because although they bang on about how they are at great fiscal managers that do politics for the people, the LNP aren't ones to really take into account wasteful projects and community concern, as they are about to dump billions into building a stadium in a cultural heritage area with little regard for public consultation, after promising before the election that they wouldn't. Why is this any different? Well, you see, before the 2024 state election, the LNP were in opposition and actually held the seats where the Stage 4 light rail would go, which is weird because usually opposition parties win back seats as they aren't in power to cock things up. So all they get to do is be super negative and let the press do the rest, and bingo, hey presto, you've won your seats back. So why do they see the need to win an area they already won and held for a few decades? Well, strong NIMBY action put the seat into marginal contention. And to seal the election win deal, and arguably save about $9.5 billion, the LNP concocted these cost blowout narratives and placed great emphasis on the grievances of stupid surfing NIMBYs in order to appear as a pragmatic political party, as well as to win over the NIMBY vote. And thus, the Stage 4 light rail, crucial element to make the project worth more than the sum of its parts, was cancelled, ruining over 15 years of planning and investment in a single day. But don't worry, the LNP has an alternative plan to fix the Gold Coast traffic woes. Remember that ZEB, the tech bro version of an electric bus? Well, the party that implemented them in Brisbane, horribly I might add, unsurprisingly used their How to Make Rail Cheaper and Worse playbook to make the Gold Coast light rail cheaper and worse by proposing, wait for it, enhanced buses. What kind of crap is this? What you've just described is basically a bus lane. And annoyingly, this isn't the first victim of LNP and shitification, because the Sunshine Coast Airport received the same treatment. Originally supposed to be connected by rail, it was cancelled by the party that hates rail in order to instead build the Wave. Oh my god. It's just another bus. Yes, this will be another topic for a video. But the Gold Coast enhanced bus lanes might actually be worse than they sound. As in the few bits of information, they actually don't mention anything about bus lanes. In fact, they actively want to avoid building dedicated bus lanes because they would have to essentially do what the light rail would have already done, which is take away lanes and parking. And they can't just repurpose car lanes into bus lanes because the NIMBYs already complained about losing road and parking spaces. And neither could they build a separate bus lane because that would again entail building new bridges and cutting through a koala habitat that would end up costing the same as the light rail, but worse. So essentially what they are proposing is just more buses, but electrified, and some paint on the ground for maybe some priority lanes where possible. I don't know, but this is just so frustrating to watch. We went from Stage 4 light rail to connect two important destinations and so many dense tourist destinations to this, a terrible bus where you now have to take a tram to go 1 hour to then connect with a bus to connect to the airport. Yeah, I'm crashing out. And honestly, I don't blame you if you've just kicked your screen in, because this fucking sucks. But hey, the saving grace is that we can have a little bit of schadenfreude. As the southern Gold Coast densifies, traffic will get worse, and hopefully the LNP party will have to watch from opposition their stupid enhanced bus absolutely buckle under the demand it has to carry through the jam-packed streets of people trying to drive to the Gold Coast and find a park. Because I already know that the Brisbane Metro is buckling and struggling to carry the amount of people it's demanded to. So there you have it. A city that accidentally did something right, proved it worked, then looked at the successes and said, nah, too functional. The Gold Coast finally built a transit system that wasn't a monorail to nowhere. People actually used it. Property values went up and traffic slightly stopped resembling the seventh circle of hell. And how did it get rewarded? Basically got killed. It's like getting halfway through any serious medical treatment and then deciding, actually, crystals and essential oils are cheaper. Now, instead of a sleek electric light rail connecting the entire coast, we'll get enhanced electric buses, which is government speak for the same thing that already doesn't work, but with a press release and new logo. And when the tech bro mobility ecosystem collapses under real world traffic, the same geniuses who killed the tram will be standing there going, oh my god, who could have seen this coming? So congratulations, Gold Coast. You've turned a city built on sand into a transport policy built on even finer grains of stupidity. Enjoy your gridlock, your koala saving car parks, and your solar powered bus memes. If you liked this rant, consider subscribing and telling me what city infrastructure I should roast next.